The trouble with dragons is dragons make dragons, and then they make more, till there's wall-to-wall dragons, making dragons galore. Then dragons start spreading all over the place. Soon their houses and roads take up all of the space. Dragons eat all the food and all the drink, and use everything up without stopping to think. They also throw parties and make lots of noise, and leave a huge mess after playing with their toys. Dragons chop down the forests, which melts both the poles, and punctures the atmosphere full of big holes. Dragons blow out hot air, which makes everything hotter, and hotter, and hotter, until all the snow melts and the ice turns to water. Then the seas start to rise and the deserts expand until everything's covered in water or sand. Say goodbye to the world into which you were born, for the dragons have made it all tattered and torn. Poor dragons, imagine a world with no birds and no bees, just dragons as far as a dragon can see. A dragon said,
"Don't go, don't leave us alone. A world without wildlife is no kind of home."
The other one said,
"We promise to do what it takes to make the planet good for all of our sakes."
As the waters rose higher right over their knees, Mother Nature said,
"Okay, start by not chopping down trees."
Then all of the animals chimed in with advice, from the greatest of elephants to the smallest of mice.
Eat food that is grown much closer to home and leave fireplaces and ice caps alone.
Turn down your heaters and get some fresh air.
There's enough to go around if we all share.
Respect all Earth's creatures and cherish the land. Recycle, reuse, and reduce your demands.
So, if you know a dragon, and most of us do, ask if it thinks that this story is true. For if we can't see that our stories are linked, then sadly, like dragons, we could be extinct.
My granddaughter wanted me to preach a sermon. It's Earth Day. They've been working over all these issues and talking about earth things, all the stuff you've put on your leaves. And she comes to me and says, "Why are you leaving me the world the way it is?" I was kind of taken aback. I thought about all the things I did, and then I went and thought about all the things I hadn't done. And I looked at her and I said, "Well, it's kind of complicated. When I was your age, I was learning about the earth, but right then there was a war going on, and we were mobilizing and working against the big military might and working for peace. And then I got involved and we were working on women's issues, women's rights, human rights. And then I got involved, with LGBT and again, more of those human rights and working for peace amongst people. And, it's just kind of complicated. And she looks at me and she says, "Well, can't you do more than one thing at a time?" Well, I said, "It is kind of complicated." By that time, I was doing more than one thing at a time. I had daughters, had a family, working to keep things together, a job, still involved at church, and, they were doing lots of stuff. And well, it's just, I felt overwhelmed a little bit, I think. But I did think about the earth. But, I wasn't thinking about you. And I don't mean to sound callous or anything, because you're really important, but you were a little further down the road. And day-to-day stuff just seemed to take everything. And she kind of gave me this look. It was kind of pitying. I stepped into that void before she could say anything else, and I said, there was so much going on. And we were getting reports about endangered species, about the dirty rivers and the canals that were all polluted, and working on issues, and as much as it was all of this bad stuff, there was also things happening. I mean, we had the Endangered Species Act, the EPA came about. Things were going and happening, and as much as the scientists and politicians would talk about the things that were tough to work on, they were also talking about what we could do, and that technology was coming to help us, that we could clean things up. And scientists were just on the verge of getting solutions for us. And I kind of believed them, and I kind of let some of that go. And I looked at her with her eyes watching me, and I said, I guess it's time to take it up again, isn't it?
Good morning. I'm Amanda DeBose, and my family and I have been attending First Unitarian for a little less than a year now. Like many of you, November's elections had me feeling a bit helpless in the face of what seemed like an oncoming storm of environmental attacks. I wanted to find a way to make a tangible difference, but as a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, I felt like I have a limited sphere of influence. So I looked at what I did have control of, my home. I made my laundry and cleaning routines more environmentally friendly, and have increased the amount I walk and bike as the weather has improved. But the largest influence I figured I could have was with our food. Did you know that in 2010, food was the largest component of garbage put into landfills? And the USDA reports that about 40% of food produced in the United States is never eaten. That's about 209 to 254 pounds of food per person, or 113 billion pounds of food every year. That's a lot of food. On top of this, our food system is responsible for about 1/3 of our carbon emissions. I wanted to make a difference, but how? In the face of all this waste and climate damage, could I do much of anything? We're just one family. Well, I broke it down to those 3 R's of Earth Day: reduce, reuse, recycle. To reduce, I looked at where our food was coming from. Avocados from Mexico, apples from Chile, shrimp from Thailand. That's a lot of shipping and a lot of carbon. So I cut them out of my shopping list. Well, mostly. While I do indulge in the occasional guacamole, because it's hard to give up, I changed when and how we get most of our food. Thanks to the Food Still Matters program, I was introduced to the Iowa Food Co-op, and that helped me set my parameters for my project: seasonally available and produced within the state of Iowa. In the kitchen, I upped the ante, making our food from scratch with these local ingredients: bread, pasta, bagels, jam, cream cheese, mayo, pickles. These things now come from my kitchen. No packaging or additional shipping required. But they're still made from products trucked into the city. Could I get more local? Well, it doesn't get much more local than my own backyard. Our house sits on a little less than 1/5 of an acre in the heart of Beaverdale. While it's not big enough to raise all of our food, it is big enough to make a large difference. While all my grandparents and my mom grew up on farms, I didn't. My mom jokes that she spent her entire life running away from the farm, and I've spent all of mine trying to get back to it. The longest I've spent on one was about 3 months as an intern on a sheep and vegetable farm in Lawrence, Kansas, when my 10-year-old daughter, Lark, was about 2. And I learned quite a bit, but I've never been in charge of an operation like I was about to embark on. My husband, Dave, was mostly supportive, though more than a bit skeptical. He likes his pizza from the freezer and his sandwiches on white rolls. How much work was this going to be for how much reward? Lark was excited about getting to pretend to be Laura Ingalls while collecting eggs, and Bran, my 1-year-old, he just likes being outside. I looked at it as a challenge. At best, I'd be able to provide the majority of our food, and at worst, I'd tear up 2/3 of the backyard, have pet chickens, and waste some money on seeds. The first year has been the hardest, as we've had to build a chicken coop and run, till up our garden and spread a mountain of wood chips, and learn from experience when and how to plant. So far, we've had a few Saturday work days and even gotten some help from friends. But most of the time, I spend a couple hours a day balancing nap time and reading A is for Activist with cooking, planting, and cleaning coops. We started in January when we were gifted 3 hens by another backyard chicken keeper looking to make rooms for spring chicks. These lovely ladies have been providing us with eggs and entertainment ever since. Who knew toddlers found chickens so entertaining? To those 3 original birds, we've since added 4 more hens, 7 chicks, 2 ducklings, and a partridge in a pear tree? No, not quite. I defended my last batch of chicks to Dave with, I didn't come home with a turkey. If anyone's wondering, chicken math is a real thing. In addition to our ever-growing flock of fowl, this spring I put in a nearly 700 square foot garden. Currently, I have about 40 varieties of fruits and vegetables planted with another couple dozen planned to go in next month. This little patch of ground should, with proper care, be able to produce all of our root vegetables, potatoes, leafy greens, peas, onions, and beans, not just for the spring and summer, but for the whole year. It will provide some of our grain as well, and hopefully a bit of our sugar. All of this garden goodness does come with its own waste, and that's where the second R, reuse, comes in. Our flock eats leftover bits from cooking, plant waste from the garden, and even the bits flung to the floor by the toddler. And they eventually will roam the garden, reducing any needs for pesticides by reusing bugs into eggs and meat. An even better example, when our sugar beet harvest comes in, I'll juice the roots to boil down for sugar, then dry the pulp to feed to the chickens later as food. Even the greens can either wind up on our plates or be fed to the chickens as a treat. Happy hens lay more eggs. I use this strategy all over. Swiss chard stems can be pickled, leftover roast gets turned into stew, and bones into broth until we've used it up. Whatever we can't eat goes to the flock. The things they can't eat, onion skins, coffee grounds, raw potato peels, and the like, go to our basement worm bin, where a few pounds of red wiggler worms turn them into rich, ready-to-go fertilizer in a fraction of the time as of a traditional compost pile. Which brings us to that third R, recycle. In order to reduce our food waste as much as possible, everything gets recycled. Only the boiled bones go into the trash. Even the chicken poop is useful. It goes in our compost pile with everything either too slimy or moldy for the chickens or worms to eat, to age into compost to fertilize next year's garden. Everything comes full circle, or at least that's the hope. While my family is mostly on board, it has yet to be seen, there's still some pining for Cheerios, or for Cheetos, or cheap chocolate ice cream. And I never know what Dave will come back with if he goes to the store. But I feel like I have accomplished something. Our peas have sprouted and are growing like gangbusters. The little chicks are happily peeping and creating manure. And while it has yet to be seen if I can pull this off, at the end of the day, it's nice to sit in my hammock and see the places I've planted, to dream about how many potatoes 115 plants will produce for the winter, and listen to the kids laughing while chasing the chickens. With some hard work, luck, and the right weather, I might just make it. Who knows? Maybe next year we'll add beehives and a hutch of rabbits.
Here's to hoping my voice holds out. I'm not sure. Hello, my name is Ellery McAllister. I'm a 15-year-old student at Roosevelt High School, and I've been going to this church since I was 5 years old. The people here are my family, whether you're new here or have been a member for even longer than I've been alive. This church, and therefore the people in it, will always hold a special place in my heart. That's what family means. And if you have a family, you have to make sacrifices, and you have to listen. Here at our church, we have people from all over the world, of different ethnic backgrounds, of different genders, all different sexualities, and with different economic levels. It's very easy to feel good about our church, and you should. But there's a thin line between feeling good and congratulating ourselves about something and then turning around and using that goodness as an excuse to stop trying. Every day when I get CNN alerts about some other disaster and some other people in some other part of the world being hurt by actions taken by Americans, it's very easy to step back and run through my head every reason why I'm exempted from feeling guilt. I'm a vegetarian. I felt sad when I read the article. I'm a liberal. I can't be bad. And then I forget. Climate change is really about the haves stepping on the have-nots. And though I may be a queer woman living under Trump, I cannot deny that I am a have. The car I drove here in was powered on the backs of poor queer women working across the globe, members of my family, our family, that are being left behind. So many have had everything taken from them. What are we willing to give? I understand that the scope of the problem is overwhelming, and that's why we need to focus locally. Last year on Earth Day, we took big steps by showing up in force to convince the City Council to create a sustainability task force. Citizens now meet weekly to coordinate this with the city. Today at 11 o'clock, there's a climate justice forum, and tonight at 5:30, there is a potluck and film on morality and climate change. Next Saturday at 1 o'clock at the Capitol, we have our part of a nationwide climate protest. We need to fight for the members of our global family that can't fight for themselves by helping Des Moines reach its climate goals and make a better future for children everywhere in the world. Thank you.